Good afternoon, viewers. Once again, Dr. Amitava Biswas from Shunetro Family Eye Care Center, Kolkata, bringing to you our regular weekly episodes of Patient Education Series. This is our 31st episode of this Patient Education Series. And as I mentioned last week, time to time we do discuss non ophthalmic topics. Last week, we did discuss the myths about fats in our diet. We had with us a very noted, dynamic, and knowledgeable nutritionist and lifestyle specialist with us, Dr. Porikshit Bhattacharya. We are with him today also. And today, Dr. Porikshit is going to talk to us and tell us the truth or the actual facts behind the myths about cholesterol, something that most people, many of us, probably look at with a fear in our mind. But the question is high cholesterol the real reason behind blocked arteries in the heart? Is there anything as good cholesterol or bad cholesterol? According to Dr. Parikshit, I'm sure he will elucidate there is only one type of cholesterol. So, this entire hype about cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and the medicines or the statin group of medicines for lowering cholesterol or control of cholesterol, is it really scientific, or is there a market oriented or a industry generated hype meant for generating business? Let us listen to Dr. Porikshit. Dr. Porikshit, we welcome you again to our show, and now over to you.
Thank you so much for having me yet again. And I always look forward to talking about controversial topics. That is the way it is regarding cholesterol. It is undoubtedly one of the most controversial topics. And it has been in the eye of the storm for many a year now, like much before most of us were probably born. So I've just prepared a slideshow. I'll just be opening that for now, and then we'll get into the discussion. So as you can see, the topic, the name which I've given my topic is pretty hard hitting. It's called Without Cholesterol, You Will Die. So if without cholesterol, we will start dying, not only as a human, but as a human race. Why is every medicine, every health industry, the food industry scaring the living daylights out of us by saying too much cholesterol is dangerous? Those of you who watched us last week, the topic was aligned to cholesterol. It was about fat. So why we decided to talk about this today was because of the flurry of inquiries coming in from my patients and other people that if you're saying fat is not bad, what about cholesterol? So, and then some patients started sharing their reports where their cholesterol was on the higher side, their supposed bad cholesterol, LDL, was on the higher side. So I thought that why not clear all of their doubts in one simple live video. So thanks again, Dr. Biswas, for giving me this chance. Okay, yet again, no industry supports me except doctors like Dr. Biswas and some more people who have kept me going. Okay, so now cholesterol is like our child's report card. It's almost like that. Like a child comes back from school with a report card. It's as if cholesterol determines our health. It's like our health report card. And that is the way it's been. Everyone is bothered about their cholesterol. And again, a slide I shared in my last presentation as well last week. These are all correlated with high fat and akin to high cholesterol. So 4 primary questions. Does cholesterol cause blocked arteries? You ask a 15-year-old kid, you ask someone working as a manual laborer, you ask some scientist, you ask a doctor. And they all know that cholesterol will block your arteries. So this is how you know some scientific information can trickle through the masses. Number two, is there a good and bad cholesterol? So, Dr. Biswas, I'm sure you and including myself, when we studied medicine, we were taught this very categorically. There's a good and bad cholesterol, right?
Absolutely.
And the moment we use the word bad, we have to stay away from it. There's some fear associated with it. And is the pharma and food industry some way misleading us into believe or to catch on to this fear? And naturally, when we talk about pharma companies, the statins are not very far behind. So are statins are they really as good or effective as they're made out to be? These are four interesting questions which I'd like to address. So this is what the inside of a clogged artery looks like. So that yellow deposit is cholesterol. So
this is a cross section of an artery, right? Yeah, a cut section of an artery. Okay.
Yes. Just let me mention, I'll be trying to stick to English this time because I had a lot of people not following my Bengali. And my Bengali is not bad, but they don't know Bengali. So I thought let's stick to a bit of English this time.
Sure.
So now what happens is cholesterol. How did this fear start coming in? Yes, it does block arteries, or I would say narrowed arteries do show up cholesterol deposits. So then, as I said, the question good and bad cholesterol. Now, there's something very strange and shocking about cholesterol I'm going to be telling you right now. There's only one cholesterol. There is no bad cholesterol. There is no good cholesterol. The HDL and LDL, which again everyone knows to be the good and bad, they're not even cholesterol. So I'll come to that in a minute. You'll be surprised that they have been known as the bad cholesterol and good cholesterol, but there's no basis behind that. So as I said,
that's news to me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was news to me also a few years ago. So are we being misled by the food industry, by the pharma industry? This is a big, big question we have to address today. And then, of course, statins. Statins are amongst the highest selling medications on planet Earth. Pfizer, everyone knows this company, Pfizer. Pfizer had a statin called Lipitor. It sold so much that the fortune they gathered only from one medicine was close to 129, and hear this correctly, $billion. That's larger than the GDP of many small countries. So they earned that from one tablet. Now, what is cholesterol? Whether you missed your chemistry class or not, I was very bad in chemistry. So don't feel shy about that. So the chemical formula is C27H46O. And this is it. There is only one cholesterol, and that cholesterol is called cholesterol.
What group of chemicals does it come under? Is it an alcohol or anything similar to that? The name ends with ROL. So is it in any way related?
It is a lipid. It's called a lipid. So basically, CHO, these are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. So they make up this. And now coming to no good or bad cholesterol. So I'll just tell you in very short what happens. Let's say I have something which is high in fat, maybe an egg, maybe a bit of butter, maybe some red meat, maybe dairy. So that goes into my stomach. There's no digestion of the fat happening prior to it entering my stomach. Primarily carbohydrate, there are three macronutrients, carbohydrate, fats, and proteins. Carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth itself. Protein digestion primarily starts in the stomach due to the acidic environment. And fat digestion happens a lot later, somewhere down in the intestine. So initially the fat breaks down into certain particles called chylomicrons and VLDL, very low density lipoprotein. So what you can see here are, these are called lipoproteins. So why I'm saying there is no good or bad cholesterol? Because they're not cholesterol. They're called lipoproteins. So lipoproteins are actually taxis, carriers of cholesterol. Imagine that if I take a bottle of water or a bowl of water and I put one drop of olive oil in that, or any oil, will that oil mix with the water? No. I don't think so. So similarly, our blood is equivalent to water. It's like same kind of form. So First of all, the food we are eating, it is getting digested and it is going to the intestines. So it is absurd to even think that this fat will end up in our arteries in any way. There's no way it can get into our arteries like that. Now, coming to the role of lipoproteins, these are taxis. So since oil or cholesterol is just another oil, since oil cannot get into the blood or any of our vasculature, what happens is we need certain carriers to carry cholesterol. Now, again, you'd be wondering, why does cholesterol have to be carried in the first place? Cholesterol is vital for life. In medicine, we had studied a few things. You would definitely remember that we studied the three macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. At the same time, we studied of something called essential. There are essential fats or fatty acids. There are essential proteins or amino acids. We never studied anything called essential carbohydrates. Now, what the word essential basically means is we need it for life and we have to source it from outside. Now, coming to cholesterol is extremely essential, but the thing about it, it is so essential that our body decided, or nature decided, that it will not depend on food sources of cholesterol. So our liver primarily generates and produces the bulk of our cholesterol on a daily basis. If I was starving and not eating anything for 5 days, for 10 days, for a month, and I did a blood test, I would still see my cholesterols at a decently healthy level. So what does that mean? The liver is going to generate cholesterol whether we like it or not, because it is essential for life. And everything else, VLDL, LDL, HDL, whatever we see in our blood reports, that is not even a cholesterol. It is just a carrier of cholesterol. So now you can see 80% of the cholesterol in your body is made by your liver. So we're designed to make that. So you can understand how important, and that's why the subject, the name of my discussion today was without cholesterol you die. Now 20% probably comes from the food you eat. It may or may not come if you have a food low in fat or low in cholesterol. Your liver will actually generate more. Now, here's another small trivia. During a surgery, during pregnancy, during illnesses, our body, if you ever do a blood test, you'll see that you have raised cholesterol, irrespective of what you're eating or what medicines you're on. So why is that? Cholesterol is healing. It is the primary substance which not only heals, it repairs. It has got so many essential functions, which will come to a subsequent slide. And our brain, which is obviously the heart, the motherboard of our bodies, that is made up of 25, some people say 40% of cholesterol. So, that is why if you don't have cholesterol, our body is just going to fall apart. Now coming to a big revelation. Measuring cholesterol. If I had my way, a patient comes to me, either I would not even look at the patient's cholesterol reports, or I would not even prescribe a cholesterol report. But since I don't have my way and patients expect to see their cholesterol values, that's why I do have to write it from time to time. But there's something very strange about the lab reports that we see, and this might come as a huge revelation today. Can we even measure cholesterol correctly? We can only measure total cholesterol and HDL. Our equipment, our machinery is designed to only measure these two values. And that also with a 15% error. Now, the formula is simple. Total cholesterol equals to LDL plus HDL plus triglyceride divided by 5. That's the basic, very simple formula. So there are 4 figures here: cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglyceride. Now look at this. One equation, 4 variables, only 2 of which can be measured. So technically we need at least one more equation or known variable to avoid a circular reference. So what that means is, all other things being equal, LDL will rise if total cholesterol goes up, okay? Or if HDL falls, triglyceride falls. So that's a simple equation, and all other things being equal, LDL will actually fall if total cholesterol falls or if HDL rises. So this is a very simplistic mathematical formula. And remember, out of these, we have equipment only to measure total cholesterol and HDL. So the rest of it, it may sound as a shock to everyone, is all guesswork, estimations. And this is what we are so bothered about. So now, no wonder an inverse association is observed between LDL and HDL. You will always see whether you're on a statin or a medication or because of the food you're eating. By definition, it is supposed to be inverse. More surprising is that a fall in triglycerides, which would be welcomed by doctors, would be accompanied by an automatic increase in LDL, all other things being equal, which would not be welcomed by doctors. And you thought this was science. Okay, I have one viewer just asking a question if cholesterol does not mix in the bloodstream. I'll come to that later at the end of the discussion. Let me go through the slides first. So why is cholesterol vital for life? Cholesterol is vital for hormone production. A bulk of our hormones are steroid hormones, okay? So especially almost all the reproductive hormones. So if we don't have cholesterol, we cannot produce hormone. We cannot produce testosterone, estrogen. We cannot reproduce. That's why I said, if we don't have cholesterol, we will not only die as humans, we will die as a human race. We will not be able to reproduce anymore. Cholesterol is vital for digestion. It plays a major part in the bile acid. Cholesterol is vital for brain, central nervous, and memory functions. Ask a patient who has been on statins for a long time, and one of the side effects they'll say is memory failure, not feeling great, feeling weak. So it's because if your cholesterol is going down, it is affecting the way your memory and brain functions. But no one's bothered about that. The pharma companies are least bothered. Cholesterol is critical for bones and for all roles performed by vitamin D. Now, this is interesting. We've all heard that we need sunlight exposure for vitamin D production, but actually it begins from cholesterol, skin cholesterol, then converts and helps the manufacture of vitamin D. So now think of a scenario. Someone is persistently low on vitamin D. These days I see like almost 6 to 7 out of 10 patients have low vitamin D. Now, a bulk of them are maybe on statins, for all you know. So they are having statins, which is lowering the cholesterol overall. And because of low cholesterol, they are not being able to synthesize vitamin D. And then the side effects of low vitamin D hit you. So this is a very interesting thing which most of us just miss. Okay, so the taxi analogy which I gave you, LDL, HDL. So first the liver converts the energy into VLDL, then it turns into LDL. LDL is to deliver cholesterol to the cells. Now, cells or other parts of the body, I'll tell you what exactly it does. And HDL is to remove the excess. So they're taxis. They're not cholesterol, they are lipoproteins. Here, just a small chemical representation of what triglycerides and cholesterol are. Triglyceride is actually a form of a fat. And cholesterol is a different molecule, a sterol molecule. As I said, it's a precursor to the synthesis of vitamin D. And chylomicron is the first breakdown product of the fats we eat. So chylomicrons, they go further into VLDLs. And if you see this right picture photograph, lipoprotein particle, remember HDL, LDL, chylomicrons are all lipoprotein, are transport vessels or boats or taxis created in the body to deliver triglyceride and cholesterol, which is a cargo, for energy transfer, critical synthesis, and healing purposes. So how it heals also is very interesting. And that healing process is part of the way in which we have cholesterol in our blood vessels, as one viewer just asked me. So what went wrong? Why did cholesterol become the villain? Now I think you're already like very surprised seeing that first answer, rabbits. Ansel Keys, if you followed my previous week's discussion, you would have heard of Ansel Keys. I'll again give you a recap of who he is. And of course, money. So rabbits, Ansel Keys, and money. That is why fat became the villain. I know it sounds hilarious, but that's the way it is. So there was a hypothesis based on certain events, be it the rabbit, be it Ansel Keys, be it the good and bad cholesterol, where money and the pharma industry comes in. So there was a lipid hypothesis which came about in 1951. Eating cholesterol is the cause of atherosclerosis. What is atherosclerosis? The first picture I showed you, the cross section of the vessel with cholesterol or fatty deposits narrowing the vessel. That is in a way called atherosclerosis. So their point was, we eat cholesterol, it ends up and clogs our arteries. Just like, if you pour some ghee into a basin, it'll clog the drainage pipes. But interestingly, that's not how it works. So just going back to a small history, there were some post-mortem examinations done very, very long ago. So what this gentleman, Rudolf Virchow, what he did was, some people were dying. They were dying for unknown reasons. That the term heart attack was not being used very much then. So they were found to have some fatty deposits. Now, post-mortem of those fatty deposits revealed that there was some oily substance. They sent the oily substance to the labs. They did not have electron microscopes then. But with whatever they did, they found them, or they assumed them to be cholesterol. So here's where the vilification or making fat the mass, fat, not only fat, it's cholesterol as well, making it the mass murderer. So it started in 1904, 1908, rabbits, now this is very interesting, rabbits were fed with high fat, high cholesterol food like milk, eggs, and meat. And then there were lesions in their vessel, atherosclerotic lesions or plugs as we call them. And from then inferred that, see, if you're giving a rabbit cholesterol-rich food, they're having blockages in their vessels. But what they didn't even figure, a rabbit is a herbivore. It is not supposed to even have animal meat or high fat. It is just supposed to have leaves or some vegetables. Interestingly, just going back to that, when the rabbit experiment was done, a similar experiment was done on dogs and mice. But that was not published because there was no atherosclerotic plaque in that. So only they published the ones where they thought that there's some interesting finding. So here you can see, as I've said in the last point, these animals are strict herbivores and not evolved to eat meat. Less well-known parallel experiments in dogs and rats, which are natural meat eaters, failed to produce lesions. And the cholesterol levels in the blood of those original rabbits fed pure cholesterol was more than 5 times what is seen in your average person today. So there's something funny about science. No matter how exact science is, if someone really wants, they can play around with science to get the results that they desire. So that's been happening for a long, long time. So these slides have a lot of interesting information. I'm not going to read through them right now. So whenever if you want to refer to them, you can pause the video and go through them. So this is basically the history of how fats and cholesterol were villainized from very, very long ago. Now remember him from our last discussion, Mr. Ansel Keys. He was known as Mr. Cholesterol. He was the most influential nutrition scientist of the 20th century. And he formed a diet heart hypothesis where he said that fat in our food, which is equal to cholesterol in our food, raises the cholesterol in our blood, and eventually it clogs the arteries and leads to a heart attack. So based on Mr. Ansel Keys and his tireless research and convincing of major health bodies, the American Heart Association in 1961, it is the first time anywhere in the world they asked people to limit saturated fats and cholesterol. So remember, get something very clear here. They kept saturated fats, or fats in our food for that matter, and cholesterol hand in hand. So they equated that both were equally harmful or both would cause the same side effects in our body. So right after the guidelines in America and then across the world, saturated fats were taken off the menu. Alternatives were given, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fatty oils, as you call them, vegetable oils these days. And coming about the money angle, the American Heart Association started calling cholesterol bad. Mind you, prior to this, The Heart Association was a small group. They didn't have much funding. Now, right after they started calling cholesterol bad, they did it after companies using vegetable oils. Now, vegetable oils were the immediate, most logical substitute for saturated fats equals to cholesterol in our food. So once they started making donations, in fact, Anselkis got the American Heart Association a funding of $1.7 million in those days. And Procter & Gamble was the first major corporate to make fatty vegetables, hydrogenated vegetable oil, and they made the donation actually. So you can see this is the money trail starting. And the moment saturated fats were out of the window, vegetable fats came in. There were already studies coming in that the effect of replacing saturated fat with mostly polyunsaturated fat, which is vegetable oils, on coronary heart disease, randomized control trials were done. Conclusion says, available evidence from adequately controlled RCTs, as they call it, replacing saturated fat with PUFAs or vegetable oils is unlikely to reduce cardiovascular events or mortality or people dying due to heart attacks. So despite the fact that saturated fats were off the charts, even in 2007, there were findings showing that it was making no difference at all. And at the same time, again, this is a slide I showed at the last time, after the dietary guidelines came into place, worldwide obesity, hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, they all started going up. So we would think that they would give us a dietary guideline to make us healthier, fitter, but look what's happening. So the next few slides, okay, this is another small chart showing the leading causes of death globally between 2000 and 2012. So you can see what's right up there. Ischemic heart disease, which happens due to clogging of our arteries, where our blood flow reduces and we have a heart attack and then we die, right? So they gave us the guidelines years ago, starting 1960, but it did not help us in any way. Even then, the leading cause was heart disease. So just to recap on the evidence, Anselkis did this 7-country study. This was the beginning of the roller coaster of incorrect information. So he did a study actually across the whole world. He called it the 7-country study, but secretly he had studied many more countries. So he was studying the correlation of fat and cholesterol in our food and seeing whether it was actually leading to coronary heart disease or artery clogging in simple terms. So Anselkis, he submitted information from only 7 countries. That's why he called it the 7-country study. But look at the number of countries, and see this graph on the bottom right side, the number of countries data he did not provide was so many. So obviously he didn't, you can understand from this graph. It just shows the total calories coming in as fat or cholesterol versus the incidence of heart disease. So he did not submit any of this because it did not suit him. It was not going as per his wish to prove that cholesterol was the villain. And then again, there were multiple major governing bodies. 1961 and then 1977, there was a McGovern report. So their guidelines said, increase carbohydrate consumption to 50 to 60%, reduce overall fat consumption from approximately 40 to 30%. So at that time, it was people would be having more lard, more butter, more meat, more eggs, but that was almost comprising 40% of your daily nutrition. So they were asked to cut it down to 30% and 30% fat. And they even mentioned, make sure that that 30% fat consists of only 10% saturated fat. Okay. And if you go do a fast forward to 2006, you will see that even there, I've just highlighted with 3 arrows, limit your intake of saturated fat to 7%. So I just said in 1977 it was 10%. Now they want us to go even lower on saturated fat to 7% and cholesterol to 300 milligrams per deciliter. Now, the amount of cholesterol they're asking us to eat That is a very interesting calculation, which I'll show in the next few slides. Just keep that in mind. They're asking us to have so little cholesterol in our food. And they asked us to choose lean meats. Lean meats means cut out the fat, just have the protein. And dairy products, fat-free, skimmed, double-toned. So it remains a common misconception that high cholesterol causes atherosclerosis, as shown here from the Heart and Stroke Foundation. This was published in 2014. So high blood cholesterol is a major factor for heart disease and stroke. By lowering your cholesterol, this is what they said, you can dramatically reduce your risk of heart disease and stroke. High cholesterol can lead to a buildup of plaque in the artery walls, narrow your arteries, a condition called atherosclerosis, which I've already spoken about. So everyone was going about villainizing cholesterol, putting the fear out there, telling us that we should not have high cholesterol, despite the fact that we need cholesterol to stay alive. So isn't it so bizarre? But even then, based on their guidelines, cholesterol intake started going down by 13%, but this reduction in cholesterol surprisingly had no effect on cardiovascular mortality. Just in the slide, as I said, the leading cause of death is what? Heart disease, till this day. So results were a big zero. The diet-heart hypothesis by Ansel Keys, which is the most tested hypothesis in the history of nutrition and disease, failed big time. And by the way, Ansel Keys was instrumental in villainizing fat, cholesterol, but even he, a point came, he expired, I think, in 2004. He passed away in 2004. Till the end, he admitted something. Now we're coming to his admission soon. Okay, there was a study. Now, people wanted to find the evidence related to all these findings. So the British Medical Journal in 2015 published the more the men lowered their cholesterol, the more likely they were to die from cardiovascular death. Now, whether it's cardiovascular death or not, I'm sure I've already spoken that you need cholesterol to stay alive. Without it, you're going to die. So now there were studies coming out saying that yes, you have low cholesterol and you might die. The chances of you dying get higher. And of course, you can see here, Time magazine even started publishing articles. Initially in 1970s, it was telling you to drop the fat. And later on, there were multiple trials done. There was still no clear conclusion to villainize or implicate saturated fats. Now, again, point which I spoke last time, the moment they ask you to reduce your fat, so what happens is, our protein intake more or less stays constant. It stays at around 15%. Like, yeah, on a certain day, you might have a lot of protein, but on an average, it stays around 15%. So if we cut down on the fats and the saturated fats and cholesterol, the only other way which we can satiate ourselves or provide ourselves with some energy is increase the carbohydrates. So this is what went on year after year until this date, this is happening. So if you can see here, eating excessive cholesterol is not related to CVD, yet many people retain this false impression from the McGovern report, which I spoke about earlier. And cholesterol, why is it not a problem? You will see here, cholesterol is only found in animals and essential for animal life. It allows animal cell membranes to bend and change shape and comprises about 30% of our cell membranes. I've already touched upon the fact that it makes very important hormones like cortisol, aldosterone, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. And it also helps absorb our micronutrients, vitamins. Because there are certain vitamins which we all know are A, D, E, K. These are very important. These are fat soluble. So we need this fat and cholesterol for processing these vitamins and making them available to us. Now, this calculation about cholesterol, this first point is very interesting. This is an example. A 68 kilo human body has about 35,000 milligrams of cholesterol, mostly in the cell membrane. So that's how much you and I, we have cholesterol already in our body. Now, our per day requirement of cholesterol, mind you, we need this cholesterol for basic cell repair and functioning and production of hormone, is 1300 milligrams. And yet statins and medicines and dietary advices, we don't need cholesterol. But look at our daily requirement is 1300 milligrams. The average person eats about 307 milligrams per day in food. So the body must still make 1000 milligrams. So since we need cholesterol to live and need 1300 milligrams per day, if we eat foods rich in cholesterol, our bodies will simply make less. If we eat less cholesterol, our liver will make more. So that's the balance. Our liver will always make cholesterol. So, when we see the blood report and see our cholesterol is high, stop worrying. The reasons why you might have high cholesterol in your blood report is you are requiring it. It's got nothing much to do with what you're eating. Your body will make it come what may. So that's why foods high in cholesterol have very little impact on blood cholesterol. What I told you right in the beginning, how can a fat or cholesterol or egg yolk, if I have it, how does it end in my artery? It does not. My liver is making it for my body and my artery. So in 70% of the population, eating foods rich in cholesterol causes no change in blood cholesterol or a tiny increase. And 30% of people, these foods do cause a rise in blood cholesterol, but research has never shown a clear link between this dietary cholesterol and heart disease. And of course, as I already told you, you have low cholesterol. I come across this so often. A patient comes to me, cholesterol is value is hovering under 100. Yeah, this lab reference says anything under 200 is good. Incorrect. I don't want to sound arrogant here, but I know a lot more about cholesterol than the average doctor who prescribes a statin. And that is the reason why I need every one of you to know this, because after this presentation, I hope that every single health professional thinks thousands of times before prescribing a statin, which is a cholesterol lowering medication. Too low cholesterol is associated with the increase in conditions such as cancer, hemorrhagic stroke, depression, anxiety, preterm birth, low birth weight babies. So I've seen on a routine basis people coming to me with low cholesterol and their health is so bad. We just increase their cholesterol, their vitality increases, they feel so much energetic. So eating cholesterol will not worsen blood cholesterol. Your body is taking care of blood cholesterol as per requirement. So then what happens when the evidence was against them? Cholesterol caps disappeared. Yeah, fat cautions remained, saturated fat cautions remained. We discussed this last week, but cholesterol could not remain the fear. So American Heart Association in 2013 dropped their caps on cholesterol. US dietary guidelines said cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern for overconsumption. So 2015, we're already 6 years down the line, yet everyone you see is trying to keep their cholesterol down. Doctors are prescribing statins, despite, evidence against the same. So what clogs the arteries? So who is this? Mimosa Basu? Yes. You asked the question, how does the clogging take place? It is related to insulin. Clogging of the arteries is more of a inflammatory phenomena. It is nothing to do with cholesterol causing the clogging. So think of a scenario where you are walking outside my house and you see my house is on fire. And outside my house, you see two fire engines. They're dousing the fire. So will you blame the fire engines for the fire? Never. They're there to repair the problem, fix the problem, get rid of the fire. So there's something called insulin. It's a hormone. It increases or reduces or stays high depending on what we eat. And yes, foods rich in carbohydrates cause an insulin problem. Medically speaking, it is called insulin resistance. So when you become insulin resistant, in a way your insulin stops working, that causes inflammation in your vessel walls, inner lines. So there's a damage. Okay, imagine like I get cut here and I have a scab formation. So imagine the same thing happening in the vessel, some damage. So a scab formation is not good for the body tries and heals it. So that's when the taxis, remember the two taxis I spoke about, HDL and LDL. Those taxis go to the site of the inflammation or the damage and they deposit cholesterol. They are carriers of cholesterol. Cholesterol cannot travel in blood alone because it's fat and water, they don't mix. So it deposits cholesterol there to fix the damage. Now, what happens if you remain metabolically unhealthy continuously? You cause repeated inflammation time and again. Then your body is going to want to repeatedly deposit cholesterol to repair the damage. And when that repeated cholesterol deposition happens, that is when your vessels narrow up. So that is the primary reason for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, narrowing or clogging of arteries. It has got nothing to do with the cholesterol in your blood test, with the cholesterol in your food. And of course, you figured out something. If you already haven't, I'll tell you. If a statin you're on is lowering your cholesterol, your ability to fix these damaged vessels reduces. Doesn't that sound scary, Dr. Biswas?
Okay. Yes,
Yes.
Parikshit, that is scary, and these facts are eye-opening. They're eye-openers. Like a lot of people may not be aware of this, and the medical fraternity, as you said.
Yeah, I just appeal to the medical fraternity out there. If you're watching this, if you're not watching this, if you watch it at a later time, please rethink your approach to cholesterol. It is so important. And it's not your fault, it's not our fault because we were taught this way. But I just feel it is criminal on certain pharma companies' part to knowingly want to reduce your cholesterol and in a way take you closer to an unhealthy life. And just they're doing it for the money, that's all. So evidence starts flowing. In the next few slides, I won't hang around on for too long. So these are for your reference. But the evidence starts flowing in that the higher cholesterol, the lower the death from cardiovascular disease. Higher cholesterol, the lower the death for cardiovascular disease in men and women. Higher cholesterol, the lower death from any cause for men and women. So what about the studies? The next few slides are just, okay, if you just, let me go back to this. Remember the 7-country study? It was only 7 countries. Here there was a study done on 192 countries. That's as good as it gets, right? So this is what the 192 countries study shows. You can just go through this later, but what it shows is deaths per 100,000 and your cholesterol levels. What are you seeing? You're seeing that the less the cholesterol, the more the deaths. And this was consistent for not only cardiovascular deaths. The top
what is there in the x-axis? That is the mean cholesterol.
Yes. Now, and what it shows is not only cardiovascular death. Yeah, that is the deaths per 100,000 of the population.
Okay.
So if you notice something here, that it is not only cardiovascular deaths, it also shows deaths from all causes, for all deaths and cardiovascular deaths. There was a uniform picture showing that as your cholesterol lowered, the deaths would increase. So how on earth can anyone want mine or your or anyone else's cholesterol to be low? You're going to end up on this statistic if you die. And leaving aside just epidemiological evidence, like epidemiological evidence is not the gold standard. It actually shows you studies based on populations and observations. So these are again things you can go through later. There's a lot of intent. Like the funny thing is when I told Dr. Biswas, when I told you that I want to talk about cholesterol, I thought I'm going to do maybe 20 or 30 slides and it's going to be a short discussion. And then I was like, tearing my hair out and thinking that there's so much to discuss, so much information that needs to be out there. So I put in everything for your reference. You can go through them. Now, RCT evidence at that time as in when the 1950s, 60s, 70s, repeated information came out, evidence came out. RCT is again randomized controlled trials. This is the gold standard to prove certain observations. So these are some RCT evidences, all telling us that dietary fat and cholesterol was not a problem. Okay. I think my brother from UK is just logged in. Hi. Now, again, this is epidemiological evidence right now. So it still says the same thing. Multiple studies of thousands of people across the population and present randomized controlled trials say the same thing, that cholesterol has never been shown to have any effect on cardiovascular disease or overall deaths. and more. These are like very acclaimed journals, British Medical Journal of Sports Medicine. Saturated fat does not clog the arteries. This was, I think, in what is the date? I cannot see the date. Anyway, saturated fat does not clog the arteries. Coronary artery disease is a chronic inflammatory condition. So I spoke about insulin-related inflammation. That is the reason why it causes these problems. And LDL cholesterol risk hasn't been exaggerated. I'll be talking about LDL in just a minute. It has been exaggerated time and again. So I know every Tom, Dick, and Harry knows that LDL is the bad cholesterol. They want to keep a low cholesterol level, but LDL is not the problem. The evidence from randomized control trials does not support current dietary fat guidelines. This is again from a heart journal. And even for dairy, you see that whole milk increased HDL cholesterol concentrations and in effects on total and LDL cholesterol, triglyceride, insulin. These do not affect anything about your heart. So you can have a lot of full fat, full cream milk and dairy products. And these are the latest RCT evidences as of now. I'm just rushing through these. We will just speak. Okay, now what about the bad cholesterol? LDL. We all know it is a bad cholesterol. We have a question asking which is better, chicken, egg, and duck egg. Both are great. Both are brilliant. Have the one which is tastier. What about the bad cholesterol? LDL as we know it. Remember, it's not a cholesterol anymore, based on what I just told you. It's a lipoprotein. But anyway, where did the notion that high LDL cholesterol causes atherosclerosis come from? There must have been another root cause for that. Throughout management of hyperlipidemia, hyperlipidemia essentially means too many raised lipids or raised bad cholesterol. The goal has always been by the medical companies to try and correct LDL. So what are the arguments against high cholesterol causing atherosclerosis? There's a medical condition, okay, so it is called hypercholesterolemia familial, and it is a genetic disorder in a chromosome, I think chromosome 19 if I'm not mistaken. So these people have high cholesterol levels throughout their lives, but there's been no correlation that they're dying more of heart disease. Okay, yes, there is a age component in atherosclerosis. Why do heart attacks peak with flu season? So there are a lot of questions, and statins and antiplatelet drugs only prevent 30 to 40% of cardiovascular events. And you'll see other cholesterol-lowering medications also do not block heart attacks. So here again, statins are known to have a slight anti-inflammatory action. So those could cause that small incidence of improvement. A major role of inflammation in atherosclerosis is now widely affected, and inflammation does drive atherosclerosis. This was published in this cardiovascular medicine journal in 2012. And these are a lot more recent findings. You see, this is very interesting and exciting information. They did a big study where they checked that people coming into hospital with heart disease, heart attacks, myocardial infarction. So basically your vessel is blocked, blood is not reaching your heart and you're having a heart attack. So they found myocardial infarction in young adults with LDL cholesterol levels less than 100. If you see the conclusion on the right, young adults experiencing acute myocardial heart attacks have acceptable cholesterol levels, optimal values less than 100. Okay, now look at the next slide. Lipid levels in patients, and this was a big study, it was not a small study, it was not again a 7-country study. It was done across 541 hospitals and covering 136,905 patients who were admitted with a heart attack. Now look what they found. In a large cohort of patients hospitalized with cardiovascular disease, almost half have admission LDL levels less than 100. So now just think about it. They have levels of LDL less than 100, already low levels, and more than half the patients have had HDL levels, supposedly the good cholesterol, less than 40. So despite having a low LDL, so many of them are having heart disease. So look here. This is a small graph telling you about what happens. The general population The average LDL someone has is 123 milligrams. And people with heart disease, the average they have is 104. So is this making any sense at all? If high LDL was the reason for heart disease, these two slides just debunk that theory. You're coming in with low LDL, yet you're having heart disease. So something is still amiss in this whole equation. And now look at this. British Heart Foundation, small stat, from 1994 to 2006. You see in the first column, percentage of men, slightly elderly men with high cholesterol. In 1994, it was 87%. 21% people were having heart disease. So as per the dietary guidelines, once they push down the total cholesterol to 54, it still remained the same. Now coming to something, I had to include this because the health industry, the food industry, everyone tells you that have oats. Oats has a remarkable ability to lower your cholesterol. So now if you've already been watching the last 30-40 minutes, you know that we don't need to reduce cholesterol. Cholesterol lowering is actually unhealthy and it will increase mortality rates. But the thing about plant sterols are a plant form of cholesterol. So they actually lower cholesterol, lower your total cholesterol, but they increase risk for coronary heart disease. So I know a lot of my patients or people out there have their oats to remain healthy. Now, oats contains plant sterol. Now, what a plant sterol does is actually it competes in your gut against your regular cholesterol. And because of that, it starts lowering your cholesterol. But look what's happening. It increases risk for heart disease. So we are told have oats to reduce your cholesterol and be healthy. But in a way, oats, and plus it's got a lot of carbohydrates, which is increasing inflammation, and inflammation causes cholesterol deposits. So be careful of your oats. Now coming to the final chapter in today's discussion, the reason for which the pharma companies will be waiting to kill me, it's statins. Statins are drugs designed to stop the body from producing cholesterol that it is designed to produce in the first place. So we are designed to produce 1,000 milligrams of cholesterol. Our liver is designed to do that. Yet we are feeding populations with statins which are trying to stop that. So what a weird scenario we're in, right? Coming to the financial part, this is how they've been doing business. As I said, Lipitor by Pfizer, $129 billion since 1997 only. It's just a few years. That's the money they've been making. 11 studies involving 95,000 participants over 4.5 years based on the British Medical Journal data showed this. People with history of heart disease. So say you have a heart disease, your doctor says, start a statin. Your lifespan increases by only 5 days. So that could have happened anyway. And people with no history of heart disease, your lifespan increases by 3.1 days. So do you want to have a statin every day, go through the side effects of that, pay money for that statin, they're not cheap by the way, and increase your lifespan by 3.1 days? I'd say listen to some good music, travel, eat some good food, be happy, your life will increase by 100 days. You don't need a statin for that. These are newspaper articles. Statins add a mere 3 days to life. So what happens when you take statins? It lowers your cholesterol, that much everyone knows. You don't have to be a doctor for that. But again, when you lower it, you are taking away that vital substance which you need for life. Okay, you have side effects like muscle pain, weakness, erectile dysfunction, memory. Erectile dysfunction, so many people have at an early age. Why? Because testosterone, which you need, the precursor to that is cholesterol. Everything starts dropping. You test 10 healthy young men these days for testosterone. You'll see 7 have lower than normal levels. So again, as I said, cholesterol, low testosterone, less reproductive function. The human race is in danger. Come on. These are some more side effects of, they can actually cause immunosuppression. So, during this COVID era, I was trying to keep my patients' cholesterol level as high as possible, just to keep their immunity high. So this is another broad subject, but this is something you should keep in mind. Better immunity, higher cholesterol, better immunity, lower insulin, better immunity. And a lot of people stop statins. You'll see why. The reason why they have statins are, I want to avoid a heart attack or stroke, and I want to lower my cholesterol. But usually most get bothered by side effects. These are the primary reasons why they stop statins. And these are some more very common side effects of people who are on statins: muscle aches, cramps, pain, stiffness, joint or bone pain. Remember, you need cholesterol for what? Vitamin D. Sunlight exposure, cholesterol, vitamin D. So if you're low on cholesterol because of a statin usage, your vitamin D production is impaired, your bone and muscle function gets impaired. So in every possible way, a statin is making you unhealthy. So these are some more patient experiences with statin. There were a lot of studies done just about statin. And yes, now if you're asking about triglyceride and HDL and things like this, I'll just touch upon one thing. The only two things which matter really in your blood tests are triglyceride and HDL. Now LDL, there are small dense LDLs. Like here, most blood tests only test LDL. There are LDL particles in blood tests. They show up in different sizes. So these tests can be done in India, but they're very expensive and they're not done not only in India, in most parts of the world. So it is a small dense lipoprotein which may be a problem, but usually a very simple formula to figure out what your overall lipid profile test is looking like, because that's something what most of my patients would be concerned about. Know this: number one, if your cholesterol is high, it's good for you. My cholesterol stays around 270, 280. Okay. The safe range in the lab report says around 200, 220. So ignore that. Your triglyceride should be low. Your HDL should be high. A simple formula is triglyceride divided by HDL ratio. So if that ratio is under 2, I know some of my patients who are listening, their ratio is even under 1 and they're doing brilliantly well. So if that ratio of triglyceride divided by HDL is under 2, you are amazing. I tell them you're going to live till 100 years. If the ratio is 2 to 4, it is even then considered okay, good, not a big problem. There's scope for improvement. If that ratio goes beyond 4, it starts becoming a problem. Becoming a problem for what? It increases the risk of you having a cardiac event. And above 6 is actually very, very dangerous. So things like insulin, triglyceride, and HDL should be the primary lab reports which you have to keep in the safe range. And now, of course, just depicting 2 foods which everyone talks about. Don't have an egg with the yolk. I am just bemused by seeing so many doctors and nutritionists and people in the fitness industry and the health industry prescribing someone to have an egg and say, throw away the yolk. Yolk is the healthiest part of the egg. Why would you throw away the egg? And it's also the tastiest. So yes, studies were done about eggs as well. Meta-analysis of egg consumption and coronary artery disease was done. Conclusions: egg have no risk of CVD or cardiovascular disease. I myself have around 8 eggs a day. My 5-year-old son has 4 to 5 eggs a day. So they are as good as it gets. They're tasty. So please feel free to have your eggs with yolk. If anyone is advising otherwise, either they're ignorant or they have some conflicting interest to pop you up statin. And butter, again, that oily substance which is so close to the oily substance we find in our arteries.
Pariket, just to support your statement on eggs, I have 6 of them per day, and
Wow.
all with yolk. There was a question by a viewer about eggs. Which is better egg, chicken egg or duck's egg?
Both are equally good. Both have good cholesterol. Duck egg has slightly more cholesterol or good fats in it, but I would say have the one which is tastier.
Okay.
I like duck egg more.
I have a question on statin. You were talking about statin.
Yes, please ask.
A lot of doctors say that once you start on statin, you should not stop them. Then is that true?
It's kind of like this. If I were to tell you or anyone else that, okay, you're smoking 10 cigarettes a day, so that's not good for you. So would you ever tell someone or even assume that if you stop your smoking, Is that bad for you or good for you? A statin, you can put it across as harmful as a cigarette. I know it's a very controversial statement I'm making, but what is a statin doing? Because statin has two roles. It lowers your cholesterol. And remember that mathematical formula I talked about right at the beginning. Total cholesterol is equal to HDL and LDL plus triglyceride divided by 5. So if a statin is lowering your cholesterol, naturally your cholesterol and LDL is going to reduce. So these drug companies figured this out long time ago, and they realized their medicines were brilliant at lowering cholesterol and LDL. So that's where the fear started being put into our minds that cholesterol is bad for you. And that's how Lipitor sold so much. Now, coming back to your question, if we talk about statins and whether we can get off them, if a statin is causing you more harm than good, it's lowering your cholesterol and increasing the chances of you dying. So how on earth can we even assume that taking you off statins might be wrong or bad? The only other role which a statin might have is anti-inflammatory. Now, inflammation happens in many parts of the body. Let's just stick to, your artery inflammation, which causes clogging and cholesterol deposition. I look at it this way. Either you reduce the cause of the inflammation. So if cause of the inflammation is the food we eat, the processed carbohydrates, the fast foods, eventually leading to insulin resistance, you reduce the cause of the inflammation and you don't need anti-inflammatory in the statin. And number two, statins, you can have specific, more focused anti-inflammatories. That's what aspirin does. Aspirin is not a statin as per se. It helps in anti-inflammatory action. So, someone who had a CABG or a heart bypass surgery, they're given aspirin in many other forms. So yes, that kind of a role in helping with the inflammation. But definitely you can get off statins. And you know how quickly I take off my patients off statins? The day I meet them. The day I meet them on day one, I don't even bother to look at their blood reports. Because what I try to do is fix their nutrition so that they become less anti-inflammatory. So without looking at their blood reports, I tell them, stop your Rosuvas, stop your Mactor, stop your statin. You do not need it.
Got it.
Few trivias. 13 Nobel Prizes have been awarded to scientists who devoted major parts of their career to cholesterol research. So you can understand what a big playing field this is. Everyone wants to talk about this and do some research on this. And this is one very recent trivia. It's again a small study. It was in 2021 March. So it could be also associated to COVID. Like COVID, eventually people were dying in COVID due to pneumonia, the lungs failing. Hyperlipidemia and mortality among patients hospitalized with pneumonia. It was done amongst 8,553 adults hospitalized. Look at the conclusion. Among hospitalized patients with pneumonia, a diagnosis of HLP is protective against both short-term and long-term risk of death after adjustment for other contributors to mortality in both unmatched and propensity score match cohorts. So what they're trying to say is they found that people with higher lipids, higher lipoproteins, they were dying less due to pneumonia. It was giving you a protective effect. So where do we stand now? What's the latest 2025 dietary guidelines are out? Based on this, I showed this slide in the last discussion as well. This is what we're told to eat. Even now, there's a question mark on the slide lower right side, butter. They're asking you to reduce butter. They're asking you to increase vegetable oils, which are PUFA oils. And despite everyone's efforts, cholesterol and fats remain the villain, despite guidelines saying no. And again, this is another very common slide I show everywhere. Over the years, there has been a slight change in the trend of which we're thinking. Certain publishers are trying to put across the message that butter is not bad. And these are some two good books I feel everyone should read. If you have the time, if you have the inclination to know about cholesterol, because if you read a medical book, You'll just be told to lower your cholesterol, lower your LDL, and you'll be told to have statins if you have a problem. So these are not medical books, of course. Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, he's one of the foremost researchers. Another one is called Zoe Harcombe. So these two books, if you get your time, please go through them. You will be amazed at what we don't know about cholesterol and how misled we are. Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. Biswas and Sunitra, for this opportunity once again. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too.
Parikshit, that was very good, and I also got to learn, and I'm sure many viewers who have watched or will watch in the future will also learn a lot about the facts about cholesterol. And I look forward to hearing more from you on diet and nutrition related topics, such as the benefits of fasting, for example.
Yeah, that's
Sometime
another
you
topic we wish to do in the future.
yes,
Fasting
yes,
is
and thank
something
you.
which we've been designed to do, so I will definitely talk about that and many more topics.
And for our viewers, next week we'll be back with an ophthalmic topic. The topic will be declared soon. And until then, thanks for watching. Thanks for being with us. And thanks to Dr. Parikshit for the enlightening talk. Uh,
To
for
you
today,
for
we
giving me
have.
this chance and being a slightly unconventional doctor.
Yeah, but I am your patient too, so to say, and my lifestyle and my life has changed ever since I have been following your advices in many ways. So I can
Thanks so
vouch
much,
for
man, and
everything.
having the faith.
I can
Thank you.
vouch for everything that you have said. Thank you.
Yeah,
So goodbye for now. Goodbye today, viewers. Until we meet again. Bye bye.
bye.